You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast, where it's all about education, support, and coaching for adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Zena, a late diagnosed ADHDer, here to help you unpack the challenges, frustrations, and the positive side of living with ADHD. With my no BS approach, I'll help you to better understand your unique ADHD brain and how you can work with it to feel better, increase your self-confidence, improve your relationships, and ultimately achieve your goals. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to tackle a very big, very important topic in the ADHD community, and that is RSD, which stands for Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria, although I have a tendency to say Rejection Sensitivity Dysphoria. If you ask me, yogurt, it doesn't really matter, okay? But we are going to dive right into that today. And first of all, I wanted to share a meme that I saw just yesterday that perfectly described the RSD experience. So this is what it had. Someone doesn't text you back. Me. It's okay. My brain. They hate you. Me. Wait, what? My brain. They hate you. You suck. You've done something wrong. You're annoying. It's all your fault. Yes. So RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, is when we feel an extreme emotional sensitivity and, reaction response, pain really, due to a perceived or an actual rejection, criticism, or failure. Okay. And this is very common in the ADHD community. In fact, I have not yet met anybody with ADHD who doesn't experience this, myself included. And it's important to acknowledge that nobody, right, ADHD or neurotypical, nobody likes to be rejected, criticized, or fail. But RSD is different, okay? It is a whole different level, a very extreme intensity on that. So it can trigger an overwhelming and painful emotional response in people with ADHD. So just last week, my partner was out and I decided, you know what, I'm going to do the grocery list for him, right? This is a chore that we both hate doing. We hate to, do the grocery list and go through. We've got like a printed version, like everything that we need or don't need, right? And so I decided, you know what, he's doing the grocery shop tomorrow. I'm going to go through and I'll do the list for him. And I was cooking dinner, so I had some time in between just to go through and do this list. And I thought, you know what, it's something nice. And then he comes home from being out and he looks at the list and he might have said thank you. I don't even know, right? And he said, I just remember him saying, do we really need all of this stuff? And then he goes into the pantry and he starts looking at the cupboards to see, like, do we really need this or what have you? Immediately, I was like, what in the actual fuck, right? I felt attacked. I responded with, I'm pretty sure I yelled, if you're going to question this list, then I'm not going to do this again. Stuff you sort of thing. I got super defensive. I was really angry and I started to shut down. And he kind of continued to joke around, not really realizing what was happening for a moment. And then he was like, oh my gosh, hang on a moment. Are you okay? What's happening? And I said to him, I just feel really attacked. I did this nice thing for you and you're attacking me for it. And anyway, we talked through it. Now, I could not have told you in that moment, that night, right? I could not have told you at the time that it was RSD. I was only able to see that on reflecting a couple of days later, that in that moment, I felt criticized. I felt like he was attacking me. And in hindsight, I can see that it's a seemingly innocent thing. It's not that big of a deal. But in the moment, I went from 0 to 100 really quick. Okay? So RSD is actually quite a controversial topic in the medical world, and the research is still ongoing, right? So I want to forewarn you that some mental health experts, mental health professionals may not consider RSD a real condition, not conditional. I'll say that again. Some mental health professionals may not consider RSD a real condition. Okay, I've done a shit ton of research on this, and that was something that stood out. And I wholeheartedly disagree. And there are many people on the side of the fence who disagree with those people. Okay, it is very real, my friends. And if you're listening to this, you likely experience RSD, or, perhaps it's a loved one of yours, and you're going to recognize a lot of the things that we talk about. Okay. So if you experience RSD, you are not alone. All right. So I wanted to give you some examples of when this might occur and things that I see a lot in coaching my clients. And that is when you're getting feedback at work. If you are getting feedback from a boss or even a colleague, it could be performance reviews at work. That is an instance where it could occur. If you get an email or a text message that reads, "We need to talk," or "Meet me in the office at 3 p.m. please," okay, that can trigger RSD for us. It could be when you're dating and, having to put yourself out there, or it could be in business if you're launching a business, or if you're going to job interviews, putting yourself forward for a promotion. These are all times at which RSD may occur. It could be if somebody just challenges your idea. If you're in a meeting and somebody says, "Oh, I'm not sure about that because have you considered this element?" That might just cause you to shut down or to feel like you're being attacked. It might be, and I've been in this situation, when you see friends out having a great time. Maybe you see on social media, Instagram stories or whatever, that they've been out and had a beautiful lunch together, even though you were unable to go. Right, that might trigger you to feel rejected or left out and have this really extreme reaction to that. It could be when somebody says, "Why did you do it like that?" And I've had this one, right, with a few people now, where in a work setting, or it could even be at home, but somebody says to them, "Oh, why did you do it like that?" And they're genuinely curious about why you've planted the plant that way, or why you've done this piece of work in this way, but immediately you feel like, "Oh my God, I've done something wrong, I'm being attacked." And then RSD kicks in, right? So I share all of those just to say, again, you're not alone. Now, to other people, our reaction might seem out of balance with the situation. Even upon reflection, we might see that too. Right? Well, the example I shared before about doing the shopping, the grocery list for my partner, upon reflection, my reaction probably was pretty out of balance in that moment, but it felt very real, very warranted, very justified in that moment that I was in, okay? So we may be seen as being very defensive, or we may even feel like we are super defensive. And it may be that we're taking it very personally. Or somebody else might even say, "Oh my gosh, you are taking this very personally," right? That could be a term that is used in this instance. So, of course, it goes without saying that RSD impacts our relationships, right? Our romantic relationships, our relationships in work, our relationships with friends and family, everybody, okay? RSD is going to impact our work. It's going to impact our ability to go after and achieve our goals. Right? This impacts all areas of our life. So like I said at the beginning, it is a pretty big topic, my friends. In the lead up to doing this, I've been researching it now for a little bit, and I actually asked my partner, "Hey, have you got any recent RSD moments that you can think of from our relationship that I could use as examples for this podcast?" And he gave me one from this weekend just been. And immediately in my brain, I went, no, that's not the same thing. I said to him, no, that's not it. And I just sent him on his way. I was like, "No, never mind, don't worry." However, today on my walk, I thought about it and I realized he was actually right. It was RSD related, but I needed a bit more time, a bit more separation between the event and where we are now for me to be able to see that for myself and for me to be able to separate my feelings from the facts. Okay, that's something we're going to talk about again, being able to separate our feelings from the facts. So this is what happened. It was Friday night And so we have 3 boys. 2 of them are staying with their grandma. So we've only got 1, okay? And we were just sitting on our bed, and Mr. 8-year-old, he was on the floor in our room. He was playing his iPad. And my partner, who really I should just give him a name at this stage because you guys hear about him all the time. His name is Emmett, okay? So he said to Mr. 8-year-old, hey, buddy, it's time to wind down. Let's start getting ready for bed. And of course, Mr. 8-year-old's on his iPad. He totally ignored his dad, right? I get that. So 5 minutes later, again, Emmett said to him, hey, you're going to have to hop off now. We're going to wind down for bed. Again, no response. So me sitting there like witnessing all of this, I said in my loud voice, I'm not yelling, but I like get my loud voice on when I want to get their attention. And I said, hey, it's time to go to bed now. And, I just said something like that. And he looked up and shut his iPad down. To which, when I did that, my partner, Emmett, right, he looked at me and he said, hey, I'm sorting it out. Chill. Oh my God, anytime somebody uses the word chill at me, it ain't going to go well. But anyway, that was the moment when I snapped, right? In my mind, I went, he just snapped at me. He shouldn't have done that. Like, I don't even know what happened. I just snapped, right? I got up off the bed. I went into our ensuite bathroom and slammed the door. Like, trust me, it doesn't actually have like a shutting door. It's like one of those sliding ones, but I made sure that I friggin' hit it so hard that it slammed. And then I had to like move the door back. Yeah, very dramatic. But anyway, I slammed the door, okay? I took my shower and I was like fuming in the shower. Couldn't stop thinking about it. Came out. I still felt wild. Like I felt wild. Came back into the bedroom and he's like sitting on the bed and like Mr. 8 has gone to his room and he's winding down, right? And Emmett looks at me. He's like, are you okay? And again, I snapped. I was like, of course I'm not okay. Rah, 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 rah. Right? Now, in that moment, I could not have told you that was related to RSD. Okay, looking back now, and as I replay this and share it with you all, I'm like, oh yeah, I felt attacked. And when I feel attacked, that is often how RSD shows up for me, right? And attack to me is like I'm being criticized or questioned for the way in which I do things. That is how RSD can show up, okay? So I want to highlight 3 things that I think are very important to understand and be aware of around our experience of RSD, okay? Number 1 is that in 99% of cases, when we experience RSD and we react to that situation, right? Like I yelled, I slammed the bathroom door and like, or it could be like you shut down, you go quiet, you take yourself away. In 99% of cases, when we experience RSD and we react in that moment, we are unaware that it is related to RSD in that moment, okay? It's important to understand. We're going to come back to this. Number 2, it is not deliberate, okay? Our response and our reaction to other people, whether we're lashing out, whether we're shutting down, whether we're yelling, any of that, it is not deliberate. And number 3, in that moment, okay, in that moment when it's happening, when we're in it and in that response, we are unable in that, it can be seconds, it can be minutes, it could be a bit longer, right? We're unable to separate out our feelings from the facts, okay? And we're going to circle back to this, the feelings from the facts. So in today's episode, right, and the rest of it, what we're going to do is we're going to cover what RSD can look like in terms of like signs and symptoms, okay? We're going to talk about why we experience it, which is quite important when we talk about the next step, which is how to support yourself or someone you love who experiences RSD. And then I'm going to share with you 4 things to remember if and when you struggle with this, okay? So starting with what it can look like. So the signs and the symptoms. The key symptom of RSD is that really intense emotional pain, okay? And that pain that we feel internally is usually triggered by, a form of rejection, criticism, disapproval, failure, or what we're perceiving as like an attack, okay? So that might present as a sudden emotional outburst, right? Or it could be trouble containing our emotions, right? Or trouble reacting in what's considered, air quotes, a normal way. So this could look like, you have to leave work to go out to your car and cry, or it could look like, raising your voice to defend yourself in a meeting, or yelling, or, slamming a door. Some people will externalize their emotions, whereas other people will internalize them and just shut down and really go into their head, right? With the overthinking and the ruminating and the replaying and all of that sort of stuff, okay? And you could experience both of those. I know I do, right? Depending on the situation and what you're dealing with, you could experience both. What else can it look like is withdrawal from social situations. Also negative self-talk, and some people experience thoughts of self-harm. It can also contribute to or look like really low self-esteem and difficulty believing in yourself. I've heard from people who have said, to me, sometimes it feels like, especially in a work setting, I feel like I'm going to be found out or caught, right? Or caught off guard in some way. RSD can also manifest as people-pleasing because we want to, we may become very focused on avoiding the disapproval of others, right? Because we don't want them to reject us or criticize us. And therefore, we, become people pleasers to avoid that, okay? It could also look like we avoid social settings in which we could potentially experience failing or being criticized, or for some people, having to walk in on your own and experience some kind of a social, rejection. And for this reason, where we talk about like avoiding social settings and, withdrawing from social situations, it can be difficult to kind of distinguish between social anxiety and RSD, and you may experience both. All right. It can also look like we avoid starting projects or tasks or goals that we know have a chance of failure, or a chance of, if you're having to put, say you're writing a book, like putting your work out into the world and then getting criticism, getting feedback on that, right? We may avoid those things. It can also be constant or very nasty self-talk, right? That leads to you feeling like you're your own worst enemy, okay? It can be a lot of rumination, a lot of overthinking, like obsessively thinking about negative experiences and replaying them over and over and over and over again, especially the ones where there was, some criticism or, rejection or failure or something like that, and just replaying it over and over and over and over again. It's like you're beating yourself. Like you're holding a hammer and you're just whacking yourself with it over and over again. Okay? It can also look like compensating for fear of failure or rejection by striving for all-out perfectionism. And I see this with some people, and I've experienced this, where we try to get things absolutely friggin' perfect to avoid ever getting criticism. And I notice this like specifically in my business, in a project I'm currently working on, where I can redo the same thing over and over and over again, because when I look at it, it's like, oh, I'm trying to perfect it to avoid getting any form of criticism or any kind of rejection about how I've chosen to do that, right? That can spiral into anxiety. It may lead to a lot of overworking, burnout, and, it can cause a lot of issues, okay? And the last thing I'll add, and I want to preface that by saying this is by no means a complete list of how RSD can manifest, but the last thing I wanted to say is also viewing small mistakes as catastrophic, okay? So why do we have RSD? Like, why do rejections, criticisms, failures, why do these sorts of things impact us so deeply? I want to be clear that the research isn't clear. So research is not clear on this, but what we do know from the research and the experts who talk about this a lot is that, of course, emotional dysregulation, which is a key symptom of ADHD, that plays a big role in RSD, okay? And I'm going to talk about some other things, but let's start with emotional dysregulation, which is, speaks to how we feel our emotions more intensely, more deeply than our neurotypical friends, okay? We also have difficulties controlling and regulating our emotions, and we react more strongly, right? People with ADHD, we often have high highs and low lows, okay? So emotional dysregulation happens when our brain can't properly regulate and sort of read the signals that are related to our emotions. So without that ability to manage them, it's kind of like having a, what's the word I want? TV remote, right? So it's kind of like you've got a TV remote and the control the volume control is like stuck on high. You know, if you've ever had that with the little buttons like stuck down, I've had that before. And it just keeps getting louder and louder and louder until it like taps out at like 100, okay? It's kind of like that for our emotions. When emotional dysregulation is happening, our emotions might be too loud and too intense for us to be able to kind of get control of. It feels like that button is stuck down, and that can cause us to feel overwhelmed or, uncomfortable or even pain. And that is also what happens with RSD, okay? It can feel like it's on full volume, that it's very overwhelming, very uncomfortable, or even painful. So alongside emotional dysregulation is interoception, which we talked about, I believe, last week. It was in episode number 76. And if we haven't yet developed the skill with kind of interpreting our body's internal signals and what's happening, and, that kind of flutter that tells you that your heart's starting to get a bit quicker and you're starting to heat up and maybe you're experiencing a little bit of stress, right? If you can't tell that you're, say, at a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 on the stress scale, it's until it doesn't kind of kick in until we get to that 10 out of 10 and we like are forced to do something about it. Like it's all of a sudden, boom, smack in the face, right? I don't think I'm explaining it that well, but, interoception I definitely recommend is something that we understand as people with ADHD, especially if we're here listening to this because we struggle with RSD or if we, have problems with our emotional regulation, because interoception is a big element in that, okay? So when we have difficulty with this because we haven't yet developed the skill of being able to interpret and read our body's signals and signs, like the internal ones, then we can have real difficulty telling the difference between our emotions, right? What emotion we're experiencing, and paying attention to those signals of, hey, we're at an orange light. Like something tells me that we're starting to get stressed and anxious. We're starting to panic a little bit here. This would be a good time to intervene before we go from orange to red and shit literally hits the fan, okay? Which turns to our intense, full-blown RSD moment. Okay. Now, I also want to preface that by saying I never use the word preface and I've used it twice. Here we go. Let's go for 3. I want to preface this by saying the interoception element is more of a key when we talk about RSD that gradually comes on and it doesn't always, right? Sometimes it's just like, boom, somebody said something and we've gone from 0 to 100. Okay. So other reasons why we experience this is because of our past experiences, okay? We've heard before, I've said it so many times on the podcast, that by age 10, a child with ADHD has heard 20,000 more criticisms than their peers, okay? The studies have been done that demonstrate this. So what that means is, compound that to the age that we are when we're eventually diagnosed. But the reality is that we've heard so much more negative feedback, negative, criticisms than the people around us. And that gets wired into us, okay? Our nervous systems actually hold on to memories and experiences. This will be why, you may be in an environment and just shut down and not know why, because, you've had this past experience maybe when you were 5 years old where something really awful happened in a similar scenario and your nervous system remembers that, but maybe you don't, okay? We're not going to get too much into the weeds of that because I could, but for example, if you were bullied in school, right? If you were rejected by people in the classroom or by a boyfriend or, abandoned by your parents, if you experienced any of that, right? while you may not be like consciously thinking about it in a moment, your nervous system has held on to all of that. Okay, so all of that's kind of wired into your brain and body, shall we say. And so, of course, that's going to impact you in scenarios that kind of replicate situations you may have been in the past. All right, I hope that makes sense. The next one here is the stigma and misunderstanding that comes with having ADHD. Okay, so much of society has got this, really negative view or outlook on ADHD, or they have this idea that it's just that little boy at school who, needs more discipline, right? Because he's naughty and what have you. Like, there's just such a misunderstanding. And I want to say that we are doing so much to change that. And I think that the world is starting to change. However, of course, that's going to be an element of why we experience our RSD, because if we are seen as being different in the world or not conforming to societal norms, then we're going to experience more criticism than other people because of that. And of course, that's going to impact our self-esteem, especially like when we don't know that there is a valid reason why we're being different, why we're doing things differently, why we struggle with certain things. Like if we don't know we have ADHD and we're just trying our hardest to be like everybody else, right, the weight of that. So of course that's going to contribute to our, sensitivities of future experiences of being criticized, of being rejected. Another thing that contributes to the RSD and why we experience this is our brain, okay? And when I say our brain, let me get specific. Specifically our primitive brain. So this is one portion of our brain that it has one goal, like it's one goal at all times is survival. That's it. It's on guard, on high alert, 24/7. It's looking for problems. It just wants to focus on survival and evolution, okay? And of course, that part of our brain has a very strongly built-in negativity bias, right? Looking for the worst in all scenarios, okay? So that part of our brain, that primitive part of our brain whose goal is survival, will often perceive a situation very quickly as terrible, awful, I need to do something about it, okay? So that's a factor in here as well. Another thing that impacts why we experience RSD is our all or nothing thinking. But the reality is, although I giggle, right, the reality is that as people with ADHD, we are comfortable in the extremes. We are either good or bad. And when we're bad, then everything is bad, terrible, awful, the whole lot, right? Our whole life. If we're having a bad day, our whole life is bad. That's how it feels, right? And to me, it's kind of like we've got a magnifying glass on whatever we're experiencing. It's like intensified and turned up and huge, okay? But our all or nothing thinking definitely contributes to the RSD, because in that moment, right, for example, when my partner said something about the shopping list, I don't see any grey. Right? All I see is he's either grateful that I did it or he's criticizing it, right? There is no in between, right? That was all I see. So that's what I mean about all or nothing, right? It's either awesome or it's awful, right? And the final thing that comes into why we likely experience RSD, another factor is shame, okay? Most ADHDers have this underlying belief, or have at some point, okay, had this underlying belief that there is something wrong with them. And if that's in there, then anytime we get a little bit of feedback, okay, anytime something doesn't go to plan, right, every time we make a mistake or there is a rejection in there, that little secret that we've been hiding, we've been trying to maybe even hide from ourselves, right? That little belief in there that says there is something wrong with me. It becomes visible to the world and it's like a monster that's just been fed, okay? So if that underlying belief still lives within us, then of course, right, we're going to have an intense reaction to that. So before we talk about how to support yourself or somebody that you love who experiences RSD, I did want to say that well, actually, I'll share a quote first. This is a quote from Aristotle, and it is, "There is only one way to avoid criticism. Do nothing, say nothing, be nothing." And the reality is that we can't avoid criticism, right? People judge all the time, right? We judge ourselves, we judge others. Like, we're always interpreting and making meaning of everything, right? And we can just say that that's just a judgment, right? We attach our judgment to things. But the reality is, at the end of the day, that if you want to be a human here on the planet, you can't avoid criticism. Okay, trust me, I've tried. Right? You'll know that I avoided dating for 10 years because I didn't want to get criticized and rejected, right? But I'm so glad that I faced that fear, that I decided to embrace it and deal with it. And now, I'm with my partner and, have 3 kids that I co-parent half the time, right? There's also no exit ramp from the human experience. This is something that one of my colleagues, Cara Lowenthal, says, and I love it because there is no exit ramp from being a human, right? Being a human means that you're going to experience the full spectrum of human emotions, the good, the bad, the in-between, the wonderful, the awful, all of it, right? There are hundreds of different emotions, and we will experience all of them whilst we're on this planet. We can't escape that. So all of that to say, RSD is not something that we can get rid of as ADHDers, okay? Just like having ADHD, it is a part of us. And I am sure that given the choice, most ADHDers would choose not to experience RSD, or at least to be able to turn the volume control down, right? To turn the intensity way down. So again, our RSD and our reactions to it are not deliberate. Right? They're not intending to be hurtful. When I think about this in a visual sense, I will often picture like an animal that feels threatened or attacked. So for example, if you were to imagine that there was a dog that you were trying to rescue and it had been, mistreated, and you wanted to take it to the SPCA and, get it some help, or take it to a local vet to get it some help. And if you were to kind of corner that animal, its normal response when it thinks that it's being attacked, even if you're well-meaning, right? When it thinks it's being attacked, its normal response is to defend itself or fight back or lash out, or maybe it just cowers in the corner and shuts down, right? And we are no different in these scenarios. However, there are some things we can do to lessen the load of RSD and help to reduce some of the pain that we experience, okay? So let's go through those, my friend. So first up is understanding RSD. By understanding it, that can help us when it comes to managing it. And I have definitely found this to be true myself. Just being able to understand what is happening, more so later, right? But being able to have a awareness of what is going on and why it's going on, and to know that other people experience this and this is a part of, ADHD, I find that quite helpful. And there's a bit of research that backs this up, that shows that our ability to correctly name what is happening, as well as our ability to correctly name our emotions and label them, that helps to reduce the intensity of what we're experiencing, okay? So whether it's saying, hey, oh my gosh, this is RSD, I see that I'm experiencing RSD, or oh my gosh, I'm feeling rejected, this is rejection, or I feel attacked, I feel criticized. When we're able to put those words to it, we can start to create a small form of separation between us and the temporary emotional state that we have, okay? Now, I also want to acknowledge that in most cases, we don't know we're experiencing RSD until later, at which time, hear me when I say, it is equally as important to acknowledge it, as this is going to help with future experiences that may be similar when we're in them, so that we can recognize it sooner and we can work through it sooner. Just like I was talking about before, our nervous system has memories wired in, like all of these negative ones where we were, criticized or attacked or rejected or left out or what have you. We can start to wire in new ones where we discover it earlier and we turn it around. Okay, we can start to wire in more positive things to help us, work through this sooner. So working on this is the second one, working on our interoception and our emotional regulation skills here is really important, okay? When we're able to increase our awareness of what's happening in our body, right? If we can get the notification at like a 7 out of 10 or even an 8 out of 10, right? We can begin to slowly get better at reading the signals and the cues and knowing what's happening inside of ourselves, or when we see ourselves reacting externally, perhaps. But if we can get better at reading those cues and knowing what's happening, right, we can then respond differently, and we can start to soothe, to start to help ourselves take the intensity out and work through it, okay? So the moment you become aware of the RSD, okay, it could be you become aware of feeling attacked. That's often what I notice. It could be that you become aware of feeling criticized or rejected, or you become aware of feeling not good enough. Whatever it is that you recognize as your flavor, let's say, of RSD, the moment you notice it, I want to encourage you to do the 3 S's, okay? The first one is stop, the second one is soothe, and the third one is separate, okay? It's kind of like stop, drop, and roll, if you remember learning that. I remember learning that as like a 5-year-old in school, stop, drop, and roll. Stop, drop, and do your 3 S's, okay? So it's stop, soothe, and separate. So here's what these are. So when I say stop, as soon as you're aware of what's going on, it's stop, right? This is where you hit the pause button. If we think about the remote again, we hit the pause button on our internal and external remote. And I like to physically go and set a timer, because generally my phone's with me everywhere. So I'll set a 1-minute timer that I can look at on my phone to force myself to take a minute, just 1 minute, to slow myself down. Because when we're in RSD, right, when we're experiencing it effectively, we are in a form of fight or flight, right? And our brain and body are just trying to fight to survive and stay alive, and they feel like we're being attacked, we're in trouble. So this minute is where we are able to help take ourselves from fight or flight and come down, right? Again, if we go back to the number scale, we're trying to take ourselves from that 10 out of 10 intensity and try and reduce that number somewhat so that we can get more control of our brain and body again, right? By communicating that we're safe and we're not in danger. So physically stop, all right? Set a timer, and I will force myself to either stand still and like look at the timer, or I might be sitting. That's okay. And then the second one here is soothe, okay? I do this super simply by one of 2 things, okay? And I'm doing this for my minute on the timer. The first one, when I say soothe, is we are helping to soothe and calm our nervous system, right? We're trying to get ourselves out of that fight or flight state. So I will get my hand, right? So I'll get one of my hands and I will place my hand over my belly button, right? So it's on my tummy. I'll put my hand on my tummy, kind of covering my belly button. And I will make myself breathe all the way down to make my stomach go out where my belly button is. So I want to push the air out there, and then I want to feel it come back in. So what this is doing is it's forcing me to slow my breath down and also take bigger, longer breaths. Because when we're in this fight or flight RSD state, we're taking short, sharp, quick, shallow breaths, okay? And generally it's just, kind of from our chest up. So by putting my hand down there, I've got to force the air all the way down, all the way out, right? That slows me down. The other thing I will sometimes do is I will use the physiological sigh. And I love this one because of the science behind it, but I'll actually link a clip in the show notes of this episode to, it's a 5-minute clip where you can see Andrew Huberman doing this and talking about the science behind it. But basically, when you are in fight or flight, you can't stop and sigh, okay? But if you do sigh, like, right, like that kind of a sigh, when you do that, and you can force yourself to do it, when you do that, you're communicating that your body is safe, that you're not in danger. So again, you're helping your brain and body to communicate, hey, I'm safe, we can take this down a notch, right? And we can slow our internal systems down. So when we're doing this, we're just taking in one deep, big, long inhale, right? A big inhale, and then you just take a little bit more air on top, and then you sigh it all out, right? Sigh all the air out. Again, I'm going to link to that little clip in the show notes so that you guys can just see a demonstration. It's like less than 5 minutes, plus you can hear the science. So again, the 3 S's are stop, soothe, and separate. Okay, so we just talked through the stop, we talked through the soothe. Now, I want to talk about the separate. So when the 1 minute timer is up, we've done the stop and the soothe. That is when we do the separate. Okay, this is the part where you separate out your feelings from the facts of the situation, my friend. Okay, because what happens is the facts, which are the exact words that somebody else has used, we have attached a whole bunch of meaning to them, and we've made it mean something terrible and awful about ourselves generally, right, or about the situation, and we've, reacted and experienced RSD. So facts are like the exact words, not the meaning that we've interpreted, the exact words, okay? For example, if somebody says to you, why did you do it that way? That is a fact, okay? Whereas often we might make that mean, oh my God, I've done something wrong, or they don't like the way I've done it, right? Or I've done a shit job, right? That's the meaning we attach. And of course, that's going to generate feelings for us that are pretty difficult. Okay, for example, another one was when my partner and I were trying to get Mr. 8 to bed, right, on the Friday night, and my partner said to me, hey, I'm sorting it. That was a fact, right? Those were his words, hey, I'm sorting it. But I made that mean he's attacking me for saying something, and he's thinking that I shouldn't get involved, right? And that, of course, caused all of these intense feelings for me. Right? So again, when we can separate out the facts of what was actually said, of what actually happened from our feelings, that can be a huge way to help us navigate this. All right? And this is where coaching and therapy is really, really helpful. Okay? Having a safe environment to talk this through, to understand what is happening and how you can, separate your emotions and your actions or your reactions from the facts of a situation, very powerful. And at the same time, I want to say that coaching or therapy, right, does not stop RSD from happening, okay? And it also doesn't necessarily affect the symptoms. However, it can help us, and this has been my experience, right, and the experience of the people I work with, it can help us to learn how to process and manage the intense feelings so that they're less overwhelming, okay? Ultimately, we can help someone who has ADHD and experiences this RSD to feel more in control of their own emotions. And I think that is huge. So another thing, and this is the last thing I want to say when it comes to RSD and how we can manage it and support ourselves or other people with it, is if we know that we are likely to put ourselves in a situation where we could experience RSD, where we're putting ourselves out there, we might be going on a date, or we could be going for a promotion, or, applying for a huge contract that we want to get, whatever it is, right? I'll give you an example. I talked about this in a recent episode on having your own back, where I shared how I gave a keynote. So I stood on a stage in front of like 1,000 people and did this talk. And that was the largest audience at the time that I'd spoken in front of. And to me, it was pretty scary. And of course, I was opening myself up to RSD. Okay, of course I was. So if we know we could be putting ourselves in a situation where this could happen, plan ahead. Okay, it is so worth it. It's just like going on a hike. If you're going to go on a day hike, right, you put a lot of shit in your bag, right? You probably overpack a lot of snacks, a lot of water, right? A first aid kit, like, I don't know, all the things, right? Like you plan for that. This is the same thing. So when I say plan, I will run through possible scenarios of what could happen, and I will generally have a plan for each of how I will handle it. I will practice positive self-talk. Right? I will even keep notes on my phone of what I want to remind myself to think or do, or tools I want to use, okay? It could even be that you tee up a support person to call if needed, right? For example, if you're going on a date and it doesn't go well, or if you're getting some feedback from something at work, like a big proposal, and you know that it might not go the way you want and there could be RSD, tee up a support person ahead of time and say, hey, like, could you be on alert between 12 and 1 today, because if I need to call, can I do that, right? If you've got a person like that, okay? So again, that last one is if you can, if you know it's a potential, plan ahead. All right, my friends, this episode has gone way longer than I thought. So last thing, 4 things to remember. I think these are very important. Number 1, mistakes and failures are part of the human experience for all of us, okay? But mistakes and failures do not make you a bad person, okay, my friend? I think that as a human with ADHD, as a human who can experience RSD, I think that mistakes and failures demonstrate that we are courageous for our willingness to try, okay? I truly believe that. They are a demonstration of courage. Number 2, people who are in your life are there because they want to be, okay? They are, right? Right, when my partner is I think he's attacking me, when my friend hasn't texted me back and I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done wrong? No, these people are in our life because they want to be. I think sometimes we just need to reflect on that. Number 3, this is probably my favorite, your asshole thoughts in your brain are lying to you. When your brain is being mean to you, okay, that's a lie. And I would encourage you to listen to the episode on having your own back if you haven't already, because I talk a lot about that. Okay, the asshole thoughts in your head are lying to you. Number 4, people spend more time judging themselves than they are judging you. Okay, they're not thinking about you. If you think about this, because I get this from a lot of people, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? Worrying about what they think is a whole episode we're going to have, right? I don't want to get too into it. But how much time do you spend judging and thinking about, let's say, your ex-boyfriend from high school, right? Or how much time do you spend thinking about and judging your that colleague at work who's just started, right? You don't spend much, really, in the grand scheme of things, stuff all, right? People spend way less time thinking about us than we think, because they're thinking about themselves like we are, right? So all of that to say, people spend more time judging themselves than they do judging you, okay? All right, my friend. This has been a really big episode on RSD. I appreciate that. And I just want to end it by saying you are not alone in your experience of this. This is another reason why I believe that community is so important. And we have a community coming soon. All right, I'm going to leave that little teaser right there. All right, huge love to you. Take care, and I will speak to you next week. If you are loving what you're learning here on the podcast, but you still feel like your ADHD is holding you back, I can help. Using evidence-based coaching tools and my own experiences, I'll help you to manage your emotions and feel better, to increase your productivity, grow your self-confidence, and create the life that you were meant for. Visit zenajones.com/thrive and schedule an ADHD support session to get started.